Chapter 2. Once upon a time, many years ago, just 20 years ago, in fact, I was living in a dormitory. I was 18 and a first year student. I was new to Tokyo and new to living alone. And so my anxious parents found a private dorm for me to live in rather than the kind of single room that most students took. The dormitory provided meals and other facilities and would probably help their unworldly 18-year-old survive. Expenses were also a consideration. A dorm cost far less than a private room. As long as I had bedding and a lamp, there was no need to buy a lot of furnishing. For my part, I would have preferred to rent a flat and live in complete, comfortable solitude. But knowing what my parents had to spend on enrollment fees and the tuition at the private university I was attending, I was in no position to insist. And besides, I really didn't care where I lived. Located on a hill in the middle of the city with open views, the dormitory compound sat on a large quadrangle surrounded by a concrete wall. A huge, towering Zelkova tree stood just inside the front gate. People said it was at least 150 years old. Standing at its base, you could look up and see nothing of the sky through its dense cover of green leaves. The paved path leading from the gate circumvented the tree and continued on long and straight across a broad quadrangle. Two three-story concrete dome buildings facing each other on either side of the path. They were large with lots of windows and gave the impression of being either flats that had been converted into jails or jails that had been converted into flats. However, there was nothing dirty about them, nor did they feel dark. You could hear radios playing through the open windows, all of which had the same cream colored curtains that the sun could not fade. Beyond the two dormitories, the path led to the entrance of a two-story common building, the first floor of which contained a dining hall and bathrooms. The second consisting of an auditorium, meeting rooms, and even guest rooms, whose use I could never fathom. Next to the common building stood a third dormitory, also 3 stories high. Broad green lawns filled the quadrangle, and circulating sprinklers caught the sunlight as they turned. Behind the common building there was a field used for baseball and football, and 6 tennis courts. The complex had everything you could want. There was just one problem with the place: its political smell. It was run by some kind of fishy foundation that centered on this extreme right wing guy. And there was something strangely twisted, as far as I was concerned, about the way they ran the place. You could see it in the pamphlet they gave to the new students in the dorm rules. The proclaimed founding spirit of the dormitory was to strive to nurture human resources of service to the nation through the ultimate in educational fundamentals. And many financial leaders who endorsed this spirit had contributed their private funds to the construction of this place. This was the public face of the project. though what lay behind it was extremely vague. Some said it was a tax dodge. Others saw it as a publicity stunt for the contributors. And still, others claimed that the construction of the dormitory was a cover for swindling the public out of a prime piece of real estate. One thing was certain: in the dorm complex there existed a privileged club composed of elite students from various universities. They formed study groups that met several times a month and included some of the founders. Many members of the club could be assured of a good job after graduation. I had no idea which, if any, of these theories was correct, but they all shared the assumption that there was something fishy about the place. In any case, I spent 2 years, from the spring of 1968 to the spring of 1970, living in this fishy dormitory. Why I put up with it so long, I can't really say. In terms of everyday life, it made no practical difference to me whether the place was right wing or left wing or anything else. Each day began with the solemn raising of the flag. They played the national anthem too, of course. You can't have a one without the other. The flagpole stood in the very center of the compound, where it was visible from every window of all three dormitories. The head of the East Dormitory, my building, was in charge of the flag. He was a tall, eagle eyed man in his late 50s or early 60s. His bristly hair was flecked with grey, and his sunburned neck bore a long scar. People whispered that he was a graduate of the wartime Nakona spy school, but no one knew for sure. Next to him stood a student who acted as his assistant. No one really knew this guy either. He had the world's shortest crew cut and always wore a navy blue student uniform. I didn't know his name or which room he lived in. Never saw him in the dining hall or the bath. I'm not even sure he was a student, though you would think he must have been, given the uniform, which quickly became his nickname. In contrast to Sir Nakano, uniform was short, pudgy, and pasty-faced. This creepy couple would raise the banner of the rising sun every morning at 6. When I first entered the dormitory, the sheer novelty of the event would often prompt me to get up early to observe the patriotic ritual. The two would appear in the quadrangle at almost the exact moment the radio beeped the 6 o'clock signal. Uniform was wearing his uniform, of course, with black leather shoes, and Nakano wore a short jacket and white trainers. Uniform held a ceremonial box of untreated Polon- Polonia wood, while Nakano carried a Sony tape recorder at his side. He placed this at the base of the flagpole, while Uniform opened the box to reveal a neatly folded banner. This he reverentially proffered to Nakano, who would clip it to the rope on the flagpole, revealing the bright red color of the rising sun on a field of pure white. Then Uniform pressed the switch for the playing of the anthem. May our Lord's reign. And up the flag would climb until pebbles turned to boulders. It would reach halfway up the pole and be covered with moss. Now it was at the top, and the two stood to attention, rigid, looking up at the flag, which was quite a sight on clear days when the wind was blowing. The lowering of the flag at dusk was carried out with the same ceremonial reverence, but in reverse. Down the banner would come and find its place in the box. The national flag did not fly at night. I didn't know. I didn't know why the flag had to be taken down at night. The nation continued to exist while it was dark, and plenty of people worked all night. Railway construction crews and taxi drivers and bar hostesses and firemen and night watchmen. It seemed unfair to me that such people were denied the protection of a flag. Or maybe it didn't matter all that much, and nobody really cared, aside me. Not that I really cared either. I was just, it was just something that happened to cross my mind. The rules for room assignments put first, and second year students in double, while third and final year students had single rooms. Double rooms were a little longer and narrower than 9 by 12, with an aluminum aluminum framed window in the wall opposite to the door and two desks by the window arranged so the inhabitants of the room could study back to back. To the left of the door stood a steel bunk bed. The furniture supplied was sturdy and simple and included a pair of lockers, a small coffee table, and some built in shelves. Even the most well disposed observer would have had trouble calling this setting poetic. The shelves of most rooms carried such items as transistors, radios, hair dryers, electric carafes and cookers, instant coffee, tea bags, sugar cubes, and simple pots and bowls for preparing instant ramen. The walls bore pin-ups from girly magazines or stolen porno movie posters. One guy had a photo of pigs mating, but this was a far out expectation to the usual naked women, girl pop singers or actresses. Bookshelves on the desk held textbooks, dictionaries, and novels. The filth of these all male rooms was horrifying. Moldy mandarin skin clung to the bottoms of the waste paper basket. Empty cans used for ashtrays held mounds of cigarette butts, and when these started to smolder, they'd be doused with coffee or beer and left to give off a sour stink. Blackish grime and bits of indefinable matter clung to all the bowls and dishes on the shelves, and little the floors were littered with instant ramen wraps and empty beer cans and discarded lids from one thing or another. It never occurred to anyone to sweep up or throw these things in the bin. Any wind that blew through would raise clouds of dust. Each room had its own horrendous smell, but the components of that smell were always the same: sweat, body odor, and rubbish. Dirty clothes would pile up under the beds, and without anyone bothering to air the mattresses on a regular basis, these sweat impregnated pads would give off odors beyond redemption. In retrospect, it seems amazing that these shit piles gave rise to no killer epidemics. My room, on the other hand, was as sanitary as a morgue. The floor and window were spotless. The mattresses were aired each week. All pencils stood in the pencil holder, and even the curtains were washed once a month. My roommate was a cleanliness freak. None of the others in the dorm believed me when I told them about the curtains. They didn't know that curtains could be washed. They believed rather that curtains were semi permanent parts of the window. There's something wrong with that guy, they'd say, labeling him a Nazi or a stormtrooper. We didn't even have pinups. No, we had a photo of a canal in Amsterdam. I had put up a nude shot, but my roommate had pulled it down. Hey, Watanabe, he said, I'm not too crazy about this kind of thing, and went the canal photo instead. I wasn't especially attached to the nude, so I didn't protest. What the hell's that? Was the universal reaction to the Amsterdam photo whenever any of the other guys came to my room. Oh, stormtroopers like to wank looking at this, I said. I meant it as a joke. They all took me seriously. So seriously that I began to believe it myself. Everybody sympathized with me for having Stormtrooper as a roommate. But I really wasn't that upset about it. He left me alone as long as I kept my area clean. And in fact, having him as my roommate made things easier for me in many ways. He did all the cleaning. He took care of the he took care of the the mattresses. He took care of sunning the mattresses. He threw out the rubbish. He'd give a sniff and suggest a bath for me if I'd been too busy to wash for a few days. He'd even point out when it was time for me to go to the barber's or trim my nasal hair. The one thing that bothered me, the one thing that bothered me was the way he would spray clouds of insecticides if he noticed a single fly in the room. Because then I had to take refuge in a neighboring shit pile. Stormtrooper was studying geography at a national university. As he told me the first time we met, I'm studying maps. You like maps? I asked. Yup. Yup. When I graduate, I'm going to work for the Geographical Survey Institute and make maps. I was surprised by the variety of I was surprised by the variety of dreams and goals that life could offer. This was one of the very first new impressions I received when I came to Tokyo for the first time. The thought struck me that society needed a few people, just a few, who were interested in and even passionate about map making. Odd, though, that someone who wanted to work for the government's Geographical Survey Institute should stutter every time he said the word map. Stormtrooper often didn't stutter at all, except when he pronounced the word map, for which it was 100% certainty. W was W. What are you studying? He asked. Drama, I said. Gonna put on plays? Nah, just read scripts. Nah, just read scripts and do research. Nah, just read scripts and do research. There's a sign, Lonesco, Shakespeare, stuff like that. He said he had heard of Shakespeare, but not the others. I hardly knew anything about the others myself. I had just seen their names in lecture handouts. You like plays? He asked. Not especially. This confused him, and when he was confused, his stuttering got worse. I felt sorry I had done that to him. I could have picked anything, I said. Ethnology, Asian history. I said just happened to pick. I just happened to pick drama. That's all. Which was not the most convincing explanation I could have come up with. I don't get it, he said, looking as if he really didn't get it. I like maps, so I decided to come to Tokyo and get my parents to send me money so that I could study maps. But not you, huh? His approach made more sense than mine. I gave up trying to explain myself. Then we drew lots to choose bunks. He got the upper bunk, tall with a crew cut and high cheekbones. He always wore the same outfit: white shirt, black trousers, black shoes, navy blue jumper. To these he would add a uniform jacket and black briefcase when he went to his university. A typical right wing student, which is why everybody called him Stormtrooper. But in fact, he was totally indifferent to politics. He wore a uniform because he didn't want to be bothered choosing clothes. What interested him were things like changing in the coastline. What interested him were things like changes in the coastline or the completion of a new railway tunnel. Nothing else. He'd go on for hours once he got started on a subject like that, until you either ran away or fell asleep.